The deep space vessel Frontier drifted silently at the edge of our solar system. Its metal hull gleamed under the distant sun, barely visible from this far out in space. Inside the ship, Captain William Hayes stared at the main view screen with wide eyes. His hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Are you seeing this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The bridge crew sat frozen at their stations. No one had expected to find anything on this routine patrol mission. But there they were. Hundreds of ships, maybe thousands, appearing, seemingly out of nowhere as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. "Full stop," Captain Hayes ordered, finding his voice again. "Silent running, no transmissions." Officer Daniel Grant nodded from his communication station. "Silent running confirmed, sir." Dr. Olivia Bennett, the ship's expert in alien languages and first contact situations, moved to stand beside the captain's chair. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, humanity's first contact with intelligent alien life. But as she looked at the massive fleet filling their view screen, a chill ran down her spine. "This doesn't look like a friendly visit," she said quietly. Captain Hayes nodded. "Tactical assessment, Lieutenant Morris?" Beth Morris, the ship's tactical officer, was already analyzing the data pouring in from their sensors. "Sir, I count over 500 vessels of various sizes. Their technology appears significantly advanced compared to ours. Their smallest ships are approximately the size of our largest battleships. Their weapon systems are... Sir, based on energy readings, a single one of their mid-sized vessels could likely destroy the Frontier with minimal effort." The bridge fell silent as this information sank in. "Options?" Hayes asked. "We could try to retreat," Officer Grant suggested. "We might make it back to Earth before they detect us." Hayes shook his head. "They've likely already seen us, and if they can travel faster than light, they could reach Earth before us anyway." He turned to Dr. Bennett. "Olivia, prepare a first contact package, standard greeting protocols." "Sir," Morris interrupted, "they're scanning us." The words had barely left her mouth when the ship's communication system crackled to life. A harsh, guttural voice filled the bridge, speaking in a language no human had ever heard before. The sound made several crew members wince. Dr. Bennett rushed to her station, fingers moving rapidly across her console as she ran the alien speech through the ship's translation software. After a moment, she looked up with concern in her eyes. "It's not perfect, but I believe they're demanding our immediate surrender. They're claiming ownership of this entire region of space by what they call ancient right. They identify themselves as the Zenari." Captain Hayes straightened in his chair. 25 years of space exploration had prepared him for many things, but not this. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Channel open," Grant confirmed. "This is Captain William Hayes of the Earth vessel Frontier. We are on a peaceful mission of exploration and mean no harm. We wish to establish friendly communication." There was a brief silence before the alien voice returned, now processed through the translation software. The artificial voice sounded flat, but the message was clear enough. "Insignificant vessel. Your species holds no claim to this or any territory. The Zenari Collective has determined Earth suitable for resource extraction. Transmit surrender protocols to your homeworld immediately. Resistance is futile and will result in complete planetary cleansing rather than standard resource extraction, with preservation of specimen samples." Dr. Bennett analyzed the message carefully. "Captain, there's something odd about their communication pattern. The translation is rough, but they seem to be following a very formal, almost ritualistic speech pattern. It's as if they're reading from a script they've used many times before." Captain Hayes nodded slowly. "They expect us to just roll over and give up our planet." He stood up from his chair and walked closer to the view screen, studying the massive alien fleet. "Mr. Grant, what's the status of our communications with Earth?" "We can send a tight beam transmission that might go undetected," Grant replied. "But they'll likely notice any broad communication. Send a coded message to Earth Defense Command. Priority Alpha. Include all sensor data on the alien fleet and their communication." Hayes turned back to face his crew. "Then prepare our response. To the Zenari." "Sir?" Morris looked confused. What response? We can't possibly fight them. Who said anything about fighting? Hayes smiled slightly. At least not yet. Dr. Bennett helped me craft a reply. Something unexpected. 20 minutes later, Hayes stood before the communication screen. Dr. Bennett had helped him understand the Zanari's formal communication style, and together they had created a response designed to buy time. Zanari Collective, Hayes began, adopting the formal tone Dr. Bennett had suggested. Your claim is acknowledged but requires verification through proper diplomatic channels. As representatives of Earth, we request formal negotiation procedures, as is customary between spacefaring civilizations. We propose an exchange of cultural and historical data to establish mutual understanding before any planetary decisions are made. Dr. Bennett watched the alien ships on the screen, holding her breath. According to her analysis, the Zanari were highly hierarchical and procedure-oriented. They might respond to an appeal to proper protocol. The silence stretched for nearly 5 minutes before the Zanari responded. Unexpected protocol awareness detected. Your species requires evaluation. You will transmit your complete historical and biological data. You will then await decision. As soon as the transmission ended, Hayes turned to his crew. That bought us some time. Mr. Grant, did our message get through to Earth? Grant nodded. Yes, sir. Transmission confirmed received by Earth Defense Command. Hayes looked back at the alien armada. Good. Now we need to stall them as long as possible. Dr. Bennett, prepare a data package for the Zanari, carefully selected and incomplete. I want enough to keep them busy, but nothing that reveals our weaknesses. What's the plan, sir? Morris asked. The plan, Hayes said, his voice firm, is to give Earth time to prepare, and to learn everything we can about these Zanari. They've conquered other species before. That much is clear from how they communicated. But I don't think they've ever met humans before. He turned to Dr. Bennett. What did you notice about their reaction to our response? Dr. Bennett smiled, slightly. They were surprised. I think their other conquests surrendered immediately. They don't know what to make of us. Then that's our advantage, Hayes said. They don't understand humans, and if there's one thing we've proven throughout our history, it's that underestimating humanity is a dangerous mistake. As the frontier drifted in space, facing an overwhelmingly powerful alien fleet, the crew began their work. Earth had weeks, maybe days, before the Zanari arrived. It wasn't much time to prepare for humanity's greatest challenge, but it would have to be enough. Director Susan Miller sat alone in her office at Global Defense Headquarters in Geneva. The message from the frontier had arrived 6 hours ago, and she had not left her desk since. The weight of what was coming pressed down on her like a physical force. An alien armada was headed toward Earth, and conventional military response would be useless against their advanced technology. She looked again at Captain Hayes's report. The Zanari had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. They were methodical, powerful, and completely certain of their victory. But Hayes and Dr. Bennett had noticed something important. The aliens seemed confused by humanity's refusal to immediately surrender. Susan pressed a button on her desk. Send them in, she said. The door opened, and 5 people entered. None of them military officers. Susan had made her decision. This was not a war they could win with weapons. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, she said. I assume you've been briefed on the situation. Dr. Alan Wright, a behavioral scientist with wild gray hair and kind eyes, spoke first. An alien invasion fleet. Frankly, I thought it was a joke until I saw the data. It's no joke, Susan said. And I didn't bring you here to fight them with guns. I brought you here because I need people who think differently. Colonel Lauren Rodriguez, a military strategist known for unconventional tactics, studied the holographic display of the Zanari fleet. Their formation is interesting, perfect symmetry, precise spacing, almost ritualistic. What does that tell you? Susan asked. They're used to winning, Rodriguez replied. These aren't battle formations designed to adapt to enemy tactics. They're designed for overwhelming force against minimal resistance. They don't expect a real fight. Kevin Frost, a 27-year-old computer specialist with a history of both creating and stopping cyber attacks, was already analyzing the Zanari communication patterns on his tablet. "There's something else?" he said, not looking up. "Their communications follow predictable patterns, very structured, very hierarchical. Even their encryption has, I don't know how to explain it, a rhythm to it, like they've been using the same systems for centuries without major changes." The fourth member of the team, Dr. Maya Phillips, an expert in game theory and strategic thinking, nodded. "They've been the dominant species for so long that they've stopped evolving their tactics. Why change what always works?" The fifth person had been quiet until now. Professor Jack Simmons, an expert in human history and cultural adaptation, finally spoke. "They expect us to behave like all the other species they've conquered, to recognize their superiority and give up. What happens when we don't?" Susan smiled for the first time that day. "That's exactly what I want to find out. We have approximately 3 weeks before their main fleet reaches Earth. I don't want to plan to fight them directly. I want a plan that uses their expectations against them." For the next 5 days, the team worked almost without sleep. They analyzed everything they had on the Zanari, their communication patterns, their ship formations, their tactics as observed by the frontier, which was still stalling for time through careful diplomatic exchanges. On the 6th day, Kevin burst into the conference room where the others were working. "I've got something," he shouted, his eyes bright with excitement. "Look at their network activity." He projected his findings onto the main screen. Their ships communicate in a centralized pattern. All commands flow from the main vessels to the smaller ones. There's almost no ship-to-ship communication at the same level of their hierarchy. Colonel Rodriguez looked interested. "So, if we disrupt communication from their command ships?" "Exactly," Kevin nodded. "And there's more. I've been analyzing the data packets the frontier has been able to intercept. The Zanari use a form of quantum encryption, but it's rigid. They don't seem to update their security protocols very often. They haven't needed to." Dr. Wright stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Because no one has challenged them in a long time, they've become complacent." Maya Phillips was already running simulations. "If we could introduce unpredictable variables into their network, create chaos in a system that expects perfect order." Susan, who had been quietly listening, stood up. "Keep working on this. I'm going to speak to the World Council. We need to get everyone working together on this, not just governments but private citizens too. The Zanari expect us to act like every other species they've conquered. Our best chance is to be uniquely human." 2 days later, Susan addressed the world. The existence of the Zanari and their approaching fleet had already been announced, causing initial panic. But now she had something else to tell them. "Citizens of Earth," she began, her image broadcast to billions of screens worldwide. "The threat we face is real, but not unstoppable. The Zanari have conquered many worlds, but they have never encountered humans before. They expect us to surrender out of fear. They expect us to fight in ways they understand. We will do neither." She explained the plan that was forming, not a conventional defense, but a global effort unlike anything in human history. Every person, with a computer, every scientist, every thinker, every problem solver, we need you all. Today we're launching what we call Operation Unexpected, a global initiative to develop technologies and strategies the Zanari won't see coming. Around the world, people responded. Universities turned their research facilities toward the effort. Tech companies opened their resources. Online forums became think tanks where ideas were proposed, evaluated, and refined. The Zanari expected a scared, divided planet. Instead, humanity united in a surge of creativity and determination. In Houston, engineers began modifying communication satellites to emit specific electromagnetic pulses. In Bangalore, programmers developed algorithms designed to introduce controlled chaos into the Zanari command structure. In Cape Town, physicists worked on gravitational distortion devices based on theories that had been considered purely theoretical just weeks before. 2 weeks after Susan's announcement, as the Zanari fleet entered the outer solar system, humanity was ready to show the aliens something they had never seen before. A species that refused to follow the expected script. A planet that turned its greatest strength, human creativity and adaptability, into a weapon more powerful than any battleship. Dr. Wright summarized it best during a final strategy meeting. The Zanari have been the dominant species for so long that they've forgotten how to face the unexpected. We humans, on the other hand, have survived on Earth by adapting to constant change. We thrive on chaos, and that's exactly what we're going to give them. As the Zanari fleet approached, Mars Earth was not cowering in fear. It was buzzing with activity, implementing a defense that no alien algorithm could have predicted because it didn't follow any logical pattern they would recognize. It followed the wonderfully unpredictable pattern of human innovation unleashed. The Zanari fleet entered Earth orbit with perfect precision. 523 ships arranged in a formation that looked like a giant net ready to close around the planet. From the flagship at the center, the Zanari High Commander watched Earth's blue surface with cold calculation. The primitive species had been surprisingly resistant to standard surrender protocols, but that would soon end. "Begin the demonstration," the High Commander ordered. A single destroyer-class vessel moved forward, its weapon systems powering up. The target was a small uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean. The demonstration would show these humans the futility of resistance without destroying valuable resources. On Earth, in the Global Defense Command Center, Susan Miller and her team watched the Zanari ship move into position. "They're right on schedule," Colonel Rodriguez said. "Just as predicted." Kevin Frost nodded, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "All systems ready. The moment they fire, we launch Operation Unexpected." The Zanari destroyer's main weapon glowed with energy. On the flagship, the High Commander watched with satisfaction. These displays always ended the same way, with immediate surrender. The destroyer fired. A beam of incredible energy shot toward Earth. But then something happened that had never occurred in the thousands of years of Zanari conquests. The beam hit something invisible in Earth's upper atmosphere and scattered, harmlessly dissipating, into the vacuum of space. In the Global Defense Center, cheers erupted. Dr. Wright grinned broadly. "The gravitational distortion field works. Dr. Walsh and his team did it." Across the globe, hundreds of hastily constructed gravitational distortion devices had been activated simultaneously. Based on theories developed by physicist Dr. Peter Walsh, they created localized warps in space-time. Nothing strong enough to damage anything, but just enough to bend light and energy away from their targets. On the Zanari flagship, confusion spread through the command center. "What happened?" the High Commander demanded. "Unknown, High Commander," the weapons officer replied. "Sensors indicate the energy beam was redirected, but we detect no technology capable of such deflection." "Impossible," the High Commander hissed. "Fire again. All destroyers. Target major population centers." As the Zanari ships moved to their new positions, Susan nodded to Kevin. "Now." Kevin pressed a single key on his computer, launching the second phase of humanity's defense. Around the world, modified communication satellites activated, sending carefully designed signals directly into the Zanari fleet's communication network. Aboard the Zanari ships, chaos erupted. Displays flickered. Communication systems filled with nonsense data. The rigid hierarchy of command that the Zanari had relied on for millennia suddenly collapsed as ship captains found themselves unable to receive clear orders. "What is happening?" the High Commander roared as his own command console displayed rapidly changing, conflicting information. "It appears to be some form of information attack," the communications officer said, struggling to make sense of the flood of contradictory data. "The humans have somehow penetrated our network security." The High Commander could not believe it. No species had ever managed to breach Zanari systems before. It was supposed to be impossible. Disconnect from the network. Return to direct visual communication protocols. But the Zanari, having relied on their advanced technology for so long, were slow to adapt. Ship captains, confused by the sudden communication breakdown, held position, waiting for orders that never came through clearly. In orbit around Earth, the perfect Zanari formation began to falter. Some ships moved out of position, trying to re-establish communication. Others remained frozen in place. Their carefully choreographed attack plan had dissolved into disarray. On Earth, Susan and her team watched the Zanari fleet's confusion with growing hope. "They don't know how to handle this," Maya Phillips said. "Their entire strategy depends on perfect coordination." Colonel Rodriguez nodded. "It's time for Phase 3. Across the globe, military commanders received the signal. Earth's modest space fleet, just 50 small combat vessels that would have been no match for the Zanari in direct combat, launched from hidden bases. But instead of attacking the Zanari's powerful warships, they targeted the smaller support vessels at the edges of the formation. Admiral Eric Johnson led the Earth fleet from his command ship. "Remember the plan," he told his pilots. "Hit and run. Don't engage directly. Target their sensor arrays and communication equipment only." The Earth vessels darted around the edges of the Zanari fleet, firing precisely at external sensors and communication dishes before quickly retreating. It was like watching bees swarm around a much larger animal, each sting small but the cumulative effect significant. The Zanari, with their rigid battle doctrine and now limited communication, struggled to respond. Their massive weapons were designed to destroy large targets, not track small, fast-moving vessels that refused to fight according to expected patterns. On the flagship, the High Commander watched in growing alarm as the carefully planned conquest unraveled. "Launch all fighter units, destroy the human vessels." The Zanari fighters deployed, but they immediately faced another unexpected challenge. Earth's atmosphere was suddenly filled with thousands of small, unmanned drones. Built in factories around the world over the past 3 weeks, they served no purpose except to confuse Zanari targeting systems and create more chaos. The Zanari pilots, trained to follow strict attack patterns, found themselves overwhelmed by targets that didn't behave according to any recognizable combat logic. Some drones flew in tight formations, others moved erratically. Some emitted signals that mimicked larger vessels. Others appeared invisible to sensors until they were dangerously close. In the Global Defense Center, Kevin looked up from his console with a smile. "Sandra Chen's electronic warfare program is working perfectly. The Zanari can't tell our actual ships from the drones." Susan nodded, her expression serious but hopeful. "The Zanari expected us to either surrender immediately or attempt a conventional defense that they could easily overwhelm. They never considered that we might fight in ways they couldn't predict." Dr. Wright watched the displays showing the increasingly chaotic movement of the Zanari fleet. "Their whole civilization is built on order and hierarchy. Chaos is their weakness, and adaptation has always been humanity's strength." After 6 hours of failed attempts to regain control of the situation, the Zanari High Commander made the decision that would change the course of the battle. Rather than withdraw to regroup and develop a new strategy, the High Commander committed all forces to a single, overwhelming attack, exactly as humanity had predicted they would. "All vessels, full attack formation," the High Commander ordered. "Disregard the small craft. Target planetary defense installations and government centers. We will show these humans the price of defiance." As the Zanari fleet began to move into its attack formation, Susan Miller looked at her team and said quietly, "They've made their choice, now it's time for ours." The Zanari attack began with a fury unlike anything Earth had ever experienced. Despite the confusion in their fleet, their weapons were still vastly superior to anything humans possessed. Energy beams cut through the atmosphere, striking major cities around the globe. Buildings collapsed. Fires spread. The first wave of Zanari ground forces landed in strategic locations, their armor and weapons making them seem almost invincible. In Seattle, Lisa Carpenter watched the alien dropships land from her apartment window. A former Army sergeant, she had spent the last 2 weeks organizing her neighbors into a resistance cell. Now it was time to put their plans into action. "They're here," she said into her radio. "Everyone remember the plan. Don't try to fight them directly." Across the city, similar groups prepared. Not soldiers, just ordinary people who refused to surrender their world. They had no weapons that could penetrate Zanari armor, but they had something else: knowledge of their home terrain, and a willingness to improvise. The Zanari ground commander led his troops through the streets of Seattle with complete confidence. Their intelligence suggested minimal resistance in this area. The humans would be hiding in fear, as all species did when faced with superior Zanari forces. Then the first trap was sprung. A small drone, assembled from consumer electronics, flew directly at the lead Zanari soldier. It didn't carry explosives or weapons, just a simple electromagnetic pulse device designed by local engineering students. When it detonated, the Zanari's advanced sensory systems went offline for 30 seconds. 30 seconds was all the humans needed. They weren't trying to kill the aliens, just confuse them, separate them, and slow them down. While the aliens were temporarily blinded, the resistance moved street signs, rearranged barricades, and changed digital displays. When the Zanari sensors came back online, nothing matched their tactical maps. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In Mumbai, engineer Raj Patel led a team that modified the city's water systems to periodically flood specific streets, forcing the Zanari to constantly adjust their routes. In Rio de Janeiro, the resistance used the narrow favela streets to separate alien squads, then disappeared into hidden passages the invaders couldn't follow. The Zanari, used to enemies who either fought directly or fled in terror, grew increasingly frustrated. Their rigid tactical training didn't prepare them for an enemy that refused to fight properly. Meanwhile, high above Earth, a more direct battle was taking place. The Zanari fleet had recovered some of its coordination and was pressing its attack against Earth's orbital defenses. But a small human ship had separated from the main defense force and was attempting something the Zanari considered impossible. The Conor, scout ship Intrepid, piloted by Frank Martinez, maneuvered silently toward a damaged Zanari vessel at the edge of the fleet. Inside the Intrepid, scientist Dr. Marcy Winters checked her equipment one last time. "Are you sure about this?" Martinez asked, guiding the ship toward a breach in the alien vessel's hull. "No," Dr. Winters admitted, "but Director Miller says we need direct access to their technology, and this is our best chance." The Intrepid docked with the damaged Zanari ship, using the confusion of the main battle as cover. Martinez and Winters, along with a small team of specialists, entered the alien vessel wearing simple spacesuits. They had trained for this mission for days, but nothing could truly prepare them for the reality of being inside an alien ship. The Zanari vessel was eerily quiet. Most of the crew had evacuated to other ships after it was damaged. The few remaining aliens were focused on repairs, not security. The human team moved carefully through the strange corridors, following the energy readings that Dr. Winters's instruments detected. "This way," she whispered, though the Zanari couldn't hear them through their suits. "The main power core should be ahead." When they reached the ship's engineering section, Dr. Winters gasped in amazement. The Zanari power system was unlike anything humans had theorized. Glowing crystals pulsed with energy, connected by streams of what looked like liquid light. "It's beautiful," one of the team members said, "and deadly," Dr. Winters reminded them. "Start scanning. We need to understand everything we can about their technology." As the team worked, Martinez kept watch. "Hurry," he urged. "We don't know how long until they discover us." Dr. Winters moved methodically, her scanners capturing every detail of the alien technology. Then she noticed something unusual about the frequency of the energy pulses. "Wait," she said, adjusting her scanner. "These crystals are all pulsing at exactly the same frequency. It's completely uniform." One of the engineers pointed to a control panel. "Look at these readings. I think their entire power system is synchronized to a single frequency. That's incredibly efficient, but also vulnerable." Dr. Winters finished his thought. "If all their ships use the same frequency..." She worked quickly, analyzing the exact pattern of the energy pulses. After 20 tense minutes, she looked up with a smile. "I've got it. The frequency, the modulation pattern, everything. If we can generate a counter-frequency, we could disrupt their entire power grid," Martinez realized. Back on Earth, the battle continued. The Zanari were making progress despite human resistance, their superior technology gradually overwhelming the creative defenses. In the Global Defense Center, which had been moved to an underground bunker, Susan Miller received reports from around the world. "We can't hold them off much longer," Colonel Rodriguez admitted. "Our people are fighting brilliantly, but the Zanari are just too powerful." Just then, a transmission came through from the Intrepid. Dr. Winter's face appeared on the main screen, her expression a mixture of excitement and exhaustion. "Director Miller, we did it. We've identified a critical vulnerability in the Zanari power systems. All their technology relies on energy crystals calibrated to the same frequency. If we can broadcast a disruptive pulse at exactly 157.8 terahertz with this specific modulation pattern, we could temporarily disable their technology." Susan straightened. "How do we generate a pulse that powerful?" Kevin Frost, who had been listening, stepped forward. "The global satellite network. If we reconfigure all our communication satellites to broadcast simultaneously," Dr. Wright nodded. "It could work, but we'd need to coordinate globally. Every satellite would need to broadcast at exactly the same instant." "Can we do it?" Susan asked. Kevin smiled tiredly. "We've spent 3 weeks preparing for something like this. Every major communications company, every government, every private satellite owner is already part of our network. We can do it." Susan made the decision instantly. "Send the frequency data to every control center. We'll time the pulse to hit just as the Zanari begin their final push." She looked at the global map showing Zanari positions. "They've committed everything to this attack. Just as we predicted. When their technology fails, they'll have no fallback plan." As the Zanari High Commander prepared for what he believed would be the final assault on Earth's remaining defenses, he remained completely unaware that humanity was about to demonstrate once again why underestimating them had been the greatest mistake of his long career. "All vessels begin final attack sequence," the High Commander ordered. "End this primitive resistance once and for all." Across Earth, billions of humans waited for the signal. Scientists and engineers at every communications facility stood ready. When Susan Miller gave the command, humanity would deliver its answer to the Zanari ultimatum, not in words but in action. The moment had arrived. Across the planet, technicians at every major communications facility counted down in unison. In the Global Defense Center, Susan Miller watched the main display showing the Zanari fleet moving into its final attack formation. "Now," she said quietly. Kevin Frost pressed a sequence of keys on his console, sending the activation signal to every communications satellite orbiting Earth. For a brief second, nothing seemed to happen. Then, simultaneously, thousands of satellites broadcast a precisely modulated pulse at exactly 157.8 terahertz, the counter frequency to the Zanari power crystals. In space, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The pulse washed over the Zanari fleet like an invisible wave. Ship after ship suddenly lost power, their lights flickering and weapon systems going offline. The perfectly coordinated attack dissolved into chaos as the aliens found themselves, temporarily crippled. On the ground, Zanari soldiers stopped mid-step as their advanced armor and weapons shut down. In Seattle, Lisa Carpenter watched in amazement as the alien troops that had seemed so unstoppable moments before now stood frozen in their heavy armor, unable to move without power assistance. "It worked," she whispered, then raised her voice to the others. "It worked. Move in now while they're disabled." Similar scenes played out globally. The pulse didn't permanently damage Zanari technology. It simply disrupted the power frequency long enough to create a critical window of opportunity. Human forces moved quickly to secure alien positions while they had the advantage. Aboard the Zanari flagship, emergency systems were starting to come back online. The High Commander, for the first time in a centuries-long career, felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. "What just happened?" the High Commander demanded. "Unknown, High Commander," the science officer replied, working frantically at a console running on backup power. "The humans somehow generated a counter-frequency that temporarily disabled our primary systems. Impossible, their technology is primitive. Evidently not as primitive as we believed," the science officer said cautiously. Before the High Commander could respond, the communications officer interrupted. "High Commander, We're receiving a transmission from the humans. On the main screen, Susan Miller's face appeared. She looked tired but determined. This is Director Susan Miller of Earth's Global Defense. As you have just experienced, we can disable your technology at will. We chose a temporary disruption as a demonstration, but we can make it permanent if necessary. The High Commander stared at the human woman with a mixture of disbelief and growing respect. How did you achieve this? No species has ever countered our technology before. We studied your ships, Susan replied simply. We observed your patterns. We adapted. It's what humans do. For several long moments, the High Commander was silent, considering options. The flagship's systems were gradually recovering, but reports from the fleet indicated severe disarray. Many ground forces were now surrounded by humans who, instead of killing the disabled Zanari troops, were simply containing them. Finally, the High Commander spoke. You have proven more formidable than anticipated. Perhaps we have been hasty in our judgment of your species. Susan Miller's expression remained firm. We're prepared to discuss terms but not surrender. Earth is our home, and we will defend it with everything we have. I wish to speak with your world leaders, the High Commander said. First, Susan countered, we have conditions. All hostile actions cease immediately. Your ground forces stand down, and we want our people returned, including Captain Hayes and the crew of the Frontier. The High Commander hesitated only briefly before nodding. Acceptable terms for initial discussions. 24 hours later, in a hastily prepared meeting room in Geneva, representatives of Earth sat across from a delegation of Zanari officials. Captain Hayes, released from the Zanari flagship, joined Susan Miller and the others at the table. Dr. Bennett sat beside him, her expertise in Zanari language and culture now invaluable. The Zanari High Commander spoke first. In thousands of years of expansion, the Zanari collective has never encountered a species like yours. You were outmatched in every conventional measure, yet you found ways to counter our advantages. Susan nodded. Humans have always been good at facing seemingly impossible challenges. It's in our nature to adapt, to find unconventional solutions. Dr. Bennett leaned forward. Your civilization values order and hierarchy, which has served you well in building your empire. But it also made you predictable. Humans thrive in chaos. We turn uncertainty into opportunity. The High Commander considered this. We have much to learn from each other, it seems. Is that an offer of peaceful exchange rather than conquest? Captain Hayes asked directly. It is, the High Commander confirmed. The Zanari collective has existed for millennia, but we have perhaps become rigid in our thinking. Your species has demonstrated qualities that could be valuable as allies rather than subjects. Susan looked at her colleagues before responding. We're open to alliance and exchange, but as equals. Earth remains sovereign. There is something else you should know, the High Commander added. The Zanari are not the only advanced civilization in this galaxy. There are others, some allies, some rivals. Your defeat of our fleet will not go unnoticed. Dr. Bennett understood the implication immediately. You're saying Earth has just announced its presence on the galactic stage in a very dramatic way. Precisely. By defeating a Zanari fleet, you have changed the balance of power. Other civilizations will take notice. Some will see potential allies. Others will see threats to eliminate before you grow stronger. Captain Hayes exchanged looks with Susan. So this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Yes, the High Commander agreed. But you will not face what comes next alone. The Zanari collective offers alliance, true alliance, not the subjugation we originally intended. 1 week later, the last Zanari warships departed Earth orbit, leaving behind a small delegation to establish formal diplomatic relations. As Susan Miller watched them go from the observation deck of the newly constructed International Space, Center Captain Hayes joined her. Do you think we can trust them? He asked. Trust needs to be earned, Susan replied. But I believe they're sincere. We surprise them. We challenge their entire worldview. Hayes nodded. Dr. Bennett is already working with their cultural attachés. She says they're genuinely curious about us now. And we have much to learn from them, Susan added. Their technology, their knowledge of the galaxy, it opens up possibilities we've only dreamed of. Together they watched as scientists and engineers from around the world worked alongside Zanari technicians, beginning the process of technological exchange that would transform human civilization. We're taking our first real steps into a much larger universe, Hayes said. And we're doing it not as conquerors or as subjects, but as equals, because we proved something important, not just to the Zanari, but to ourselves. Susan finished. His thought, that humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our technology. It's our creativity, our adaptability, and our refusal to give up even when facing impossible odds. As the sun set over Earth, humanity looked to the stars with new understanding. The universe was vaster and more complex than they had imagined, filled with dangers and wonders in equal measure. But they would face it the same way they had always faced challenges, together, with determination, ingenuity, and the uniquely human ability to thrive in the face of the unexpected.